And the best reason to have our experts on live is that you can ask follow-up questions to what they have to say. Now, the questions we're going to be starting out with were submitted in advance via email, and some of you asked several questions at once, so I boiled them down into some categories, and I brought a sombrero in which I have questions I can pull out. So we'll just be randomly pulling them out. If you do have a follow-up question come up on this webinar, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a little button that says Q&A. So you can ask a question by hitting the Q&A button, and hopefully we'll be able to see them. If for some reason I'm unable to see them, Anya, who is silent in the background, will ask the questions out loud during questions and answers. So today we're very excited to have two panelists available, and I'm also available for questions. Scott Graves from the Liberty Lab and Kevin Kerr from Arrowhead Consulting. John Sarpalis was going to be on the call, but he had an emergency come up this morning, and we thought it would be better not to have him call in by cell phone. So we'll catch John on a future session taking your questions about public speaking. So let's just dive right in, and we'll start by just each of us saying what you might want to ask us questions about, and then I will start grabbing the questions out of the hat. So I'm Nicole Williams, president of Spark Freedom, and I can take your questions on strategic marketing and communications, developing your communications shop, and other various messaging to specific audiences sorts of questions. Let me hand it down to you, Scott Graves.
My name is Scott Graves. I'm the co-founder of the Liberty Lab. We've been developing websites and applications, database development for about 10 years or so, and worked quite a bit through the SVN community, think tank community, and also do corporate work.
Great, thanks, Scott. And Kevin, can you tell us about yourself?
I'm Kevin. I'm Arrowhead 3, and we do a lot of different work when organizations have a really complicated and difficult solution, how to put a face on it and make it understandable and meaningful to people. So questions you might be asking me are, how do we handle tough objections? How do I put my policy into a story form? How do I make it meaningful so that people really want to care about it?
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Kevin. So let's start with our first question, and I'll pull it out. And this first one is for you, Kevin. So let's see. The question comes from Oregon, and they're wondering, what do I do if I have an Arrowhead but can't find stories to support our communications campaign? So this is somebody who's been through an Arrowhead process, and they're wondering what to do if they can't find real stories. How do I find them, and what do I do if I never find any?
Okay, well, that's a great question. So first and foremost, we find that when folks have gone through an Arrowhead and they start putting a face to their policy, they start to imagine these stories. And in order to find the stories, I find that they go through a progression. They first need to understand the hypothetical stories, the imaginary ones. What do we think this policy is going to do for people? So they come up with hypothetical stories that make sense. And then from there, they start putting that out to their network. Hey folks, have you ever heard of somebody that might be in this situation? And then names and stories start to come up. So these hypothetical turn into anecdotal stories. And then ultimately they start talking to these folks and find out the real stories. This is similar to what Taryn Bragdon and his group did back in 2011 with their Foundation for Government Accountability. They had this hypothetical person called Jackie, and they knew that she was this 20-year-old single mom, Medicaid recipient, and she wanted to be off Medicaid but wasn't quite certain how to do it. So they put that profile out to their network, and they found heard of this triple amputee student, Moise Brutus, who fit that bill quite well. And so that became a real story, and they take Moise pretty much anywhere they go, and they talk about this policy. Now, if you find that you don't have any stories, I would question the importance of your policy or the validity of your Arrowhead, whether or not you have real stories to support it, if it's really making a difference for people.
Okay, but what about if your policy is something that's never been passed? How do you find stories for something like that?
if it's never been passed before, check in other states that may have passed this kind of policy for stories that you can draw upon. We saw this with some of the school choice policies. But then even more important are these hypothetical stories. When you're selling an aspirational vision, what is the hypothetical story? It was the same way when Apple came out with their iPhone. Steve Jobs, nobody had used an iPhone before, so they came up with the hypothetical scenarios that people would have used. So you sell a vision, you use the word imagine, you use the what if you could to get people's attention and imagination.
Well, great. That was very helpful advice from Kevin Kerr. Let's see what else we have in the hat for the next question. This one's for me. Sorry, Scott. This one says, I need to develop our marketing plan for next year. Where do I start? I'm really glad somebody asked that question right now because it's August. And August is a really good time to be talking about your coming year's marketing plan. I even know people who start in June. And the way you start is by looking at your top line organizational goal and having a discussion with your leadership about are any of the tactical goals supporting that changing programmatically? And then you just work backwards and look at, okay, what is our core message for the year? How does that support our messaging strategy for the whole organization? And then how can I back that into the day-to-day? What I usually do is document all of the key launch points for the year. Look at some of those evergreen communication things we do, like social media and mailing campaigns or things of that nature, email campaigns. And then I overlay those two things in a spreadsheet and develop a schedule from there so that I can see if I have my weekly update email going out and I need to invite people to a Spark session, those two things can be one, and it's a little bit more efficient for the people who we are communicating with. I think the most important thing, though, is that you look at that top line goal, make sure the program decisions are made, and then build out your schedule from there. And you'll find it's very easy once you have those two pieces of information. So that's my answer. I don't know if there are follow-up questions from any of the panelists after hearing that, but okay, next question from the hat. Scott, we finally got to you. I'm not sure we won't have two people in a row at one point though. Okay, Scott, my Facebook page has had a large drop in views in the last few months. What strategies are you seeing work on Facebook? Should we change our focus to a new medium? This question has come up in its various forms a lot over the last 8 weeks. So obviously something's changed at Facebook recently, and Scott, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
For us, it's actually come up a lot over the last several years. And what we've experienced is we've had a lot of clients and organizations that we work with that have invested a lot in the Facebook platform. And many would argue it's a bait and switch. They've invested a lot in this platform. They've got, for example, 100,000 followers. And when they post something new, they expect that 100,000 followers get their message. And what they've discovered over the past, especially the last several months, is they're seeing that their messages may be only reaching 1 or 2% of their audience. That's a big investment to then all of a sudden not be reaching your audience. And so it is still a place where the audience goes to discuss policy and share with their network. But I think a good strategy for organizations is to not put all their eggs in one basket, to figure out where their audience is. And I think that leads one down a path where they think about it's not just about Facebook. Perhaps their audience is such that they need to think about engaging on LinkedIn at the same time, or allocate more of a percentage of their resources to a LinkedIn profile, blog post, and engaging on that platform instead of the Facebook platform. So I really think it depends on your audience, and I think that you have to be diversified in the social media platforms that you are deciding to use. You're muted, Nicole.
and talking and so muted. Okay, so that sounds like a reasonable answer. I'm wondering if you've played with the interaction between groups and pages much in the last little while. And do you think there is a way to leverage how those have changed to somebody's benefit?
I don't know. When it comes to Facebook, I no longer feel like I think that it's now more experimental. There is not a one-size-fits-all solution for any organization. We were working with an organization last week. It's more political and policy. It is a C3 organization. There's about 50,000 followers, and we've been posting various policy things and articles, and it may get $2,000 to $4,000 views or likes per article. The other day we posted a meme. And while that really distills some of these policy things down into its essence, the meme generated 2.2 million views in 3 days. So making an adjustment, the meme is not really what the organization is about. It oversimplifies some of their work, but if they're going to reach 2.2 million people by doing that method as opposed to offering up white papers, case studies, things that are long form articles and blog posts, I think that they've got to find a way to integrate those memes into what they're doing.
I see. That's great advice. Simplifying ourselves to get some attention and then bringing them into the fold.
Actually, let me expand on that just a little bit. If you're an organization that is generating content and wanting to push stuff out to an audience, it used to be that, I've said this a million times in the past, but it used to be that, especially with policy think tanks, they've got their fellows, they write their white papers, the editor and maybe their mother are the only ones that read the full white papers. And oftentimes the organizations wonder why their content isn't being read. And now I think it's important from the beginning of the process, when you're conceptualizing what kind of case study we want to put together, what kind of white paper do we want to write, think about your audience and think about the ways that they want to receive that information. So from the get-go, you're outlining this plan to put together a white paper, but you're also breaking it down into a series of blog posts, a series of 2-minute videos, a series of memes. And so it doesn't diminish or dilute the content and the importance of that white paper, but it does break it down in a way so that your audience can take the pieces that they want, get introduced to your message, and then if they want to go down the path where they're acquiring more, reading more, getting more involved in it, they can. But you're giving them the choice by delivering it to them in a way that they want to get it.
Excellent. It's funny. One of the ways I try to work with groups on this concept is to describe it like an onion, where the outer layer of the onion is the first thing people see. And when you choose an onion at the store, right, you're choosing one that doesn't look bruised or have too many weird things growing on it. You're choosing something that's sort of a nice golden color, and that's all you see. You don't know how the onion's going to taste, but as you get into it or deeper into the onion, it's almost like you're adding each layer. So when you think of communications, make sure that outer layer is very attractive and gets my attention like that, so that I want to ask questions to go deeper into what you're developing. If
it's done right, it becomes audience-centric. They're making the choice to peel away each layer of the onion, right, as opposed to you jamming some policy, wonky, think tanky sort of very academic piece of content down their throat. You're giving it to them in pieces that are easily digestible and that they can absorb over time, or in a manner that they think is more comfortable and more relevant to whatever they're doing.
That makes sense. Okay, I think we're ready for another question that had a lot of follow-ups. And this one is for you, Kevin. You're going to like this one. It's, Kevin, how can we persuade people we know are opposed to our policy proposal? That's a very generic question.
How can we persuade people that are opposed to our policy proposal? Well, I love what Scott just mentioned there about really getting down to the essence of it And I love the memes idea because it really is this very simple metaphor that people understand and make it digestible. And I like the phrase of de-wonkifying it, de-wonkifying it. And I think for me, I was meeting with one of the co-founders of the Cato Institute a couple of weeks ago, and he gave me this quote that I think all policy people should be familiar with. And that is, he said, policy before politics and people before policy. And that really is putting a face onto your policy. And I find a lot of times people, when they're objecting to your policy, sometimes they're the wonky people and they really get down into the technical details, or they just don't understand what your policy is doing. So ask yourself a few basic questions. First and foremost, question number one, what problem does your policy solve? All right. Second question, who does it solve it for? That gives you your hero. And if you've got two good answers to that, then the question for the person who's opposing that is, do you not care about this person? Put them on the defensive. But generally speaking, if you cover those first two things, they become more sympathetic to your policy and like to hear more about it. So find out how it solves a problem and who it's solving the problem for. And then if you've got somebody that potentially is on the other side, find the common ground and build from there. Don't dig your heels in. Find the common ground and build from there.
I'd like to add to that or expand on that just a little bit. I think that from the free market think tank community, a lot of the folks that advocate on behalf of those types of policies, often what you find are people that will very quickly support their argument with a flip chart or an Excel spreadsheet. And that might not be the language that the person they're talking to, the person they're trying to convince speaks. Maybe they need to learn to speak in their language, approach it a little more gently, and just communicate at a level where there is common ground from the get-go. Otherwise, I think you do put your I want to say opponent, but you put the other person on their heels right out of the gate where they are defensive. And I think it closes down that communication right out of the gate.
Scott, would you agree that, I know the phrase I hear often is the term kitchen tabling it? Put it into language that could go well on a kitchen table. So if you give somebody a message and then you imagine them back at the kitchen table, how are they describing it? Why not give them those terms first of all? Would you agree with that?
I agree. And I also think that people need to approach it with a little more diplomacy than sometimes I see. So you're really trying to find that common ground. And I think one of the methods of doing that is not just conveying your knowledge, imparting your knowledge or your ideas, but asking questions. So it leads them to your ideas. Yeah. It leads them to a conclusion that's closer to where you are than where they perhaps started.
Yeah, that's a great follow-up.
That's funny that you both go down that path, because I've worked with both of you for a really long time, for many years. And together, I think everybody who we've worked with have fallen into the same communications framework. Like Kevin has the Arrowhead framework. We have a branding framework. Scott, you have a digital advising framework, but our frameworks are all related and similar and can be used together. And I think that's because at the core, it's relating it back to a story first about a person to try to bring people in rather than to just go for the jugular every time we communicate. So it's funny that you two just had that little interaction. Are we ready for another question? This one is really short. Oh, Kevin, you get another one.
Goody.
This is one that I get asked this question all the time. So, and I think it's somebody who may have worked with you before because they're using your language, but it says, how do I tackle objections?
Objections. So objections meaning somebody in the middle of a town hall or somewhere has some resistance to your policy. Is that what you're talking about when you say objection?
Yeah, so I think they're wondering, how do I respond to somebody who disagrees with me in a way that moves them?
Okay. First and foremost, don't let that be the first time you've ever heard that objection. Whenever you are preparing a presentation, a discussion, anytime you're going to be face to face with anybody, make certain you know what the toughest objections you're going to have and be prepared for them. And so first and foremost, know those objections, and then understand which one of your objections are deal killers. There are going to be some objections that people have that should signify to you, you should not be in this deal. In my for-profit space, some of the deal killer objections might be, for one of my companies, might be, you're too expensive. We don't have the money for you. Well, if you don't have the money for it, then I can't fix that, and you're probably not a good prospect for me, so I should not be here. So know what objections are deal killers for you. So be prepared for them. And then also, for those that you can reframe to your advantage, do that. So there might be, I heard one, just last week when it dealt with licensing regulations. And this particular group, they were trying to reform so their state didn't have such strict licensing requirements by the state. And the objection was, well, it's just not fair. It's not fair that these people come in from out of state, and you're saying that they shouldn't have to do these same licenses. My brother-in-law, he had to go through all these hoops and licensing in order for him to get his license. It's just not fair. Well, the response was, you're absolutely right. It isn't fair. And most specifically, it's not fair to the hair braider that comes in from another state that has had her own hair braiding business for 20 years and comes into our state and can't even practice. It's not fair to the soldier's wife who's had a massage business where she's been a masseuse, and now she comes into our state. She can't have a business unless she puts another 300 hours into it, plus thousands of dollars. And most especially, it's not fair to your brother-in-law that he has to go through all these hoops. It just doesn't make sense that these licensing regulations done by one state that are clearly not needed, and they're not done in most other states.
Thanks, Kevin. That actually reminds me of one I saw earlier this week out of Missouri. And I'm not sure if the person was ready for that specific objection, but they handled it very well. And the objection, he was talking about why recertifying public sector unions is important to keep a strong public sector working relationship. And the objection was, well, people have already chosen the union many years ago, and they're able to vote in which representatives they have every few years. So there's really no problem that would require a recertification, which means you can choose a different union. And he said, and so they said, so why do you think we need recertification? And it was brilliant. He said, because we live in a democracy. Think about it this way. Imagine that you lived in a community that 25 years ago decided the Republican Party was the party that would represent them, and all you got to choose was which Republican representative will be your representative. That wouldn't be fair, and that's exactly how the recertification or the lack of recertification is now. So what we need to do is make it so every few years workers are able to choose if they're Republican or Democrat, or one union or a different union. And I thought it was really well done. I was very proud of him on that one. And again, I'm not sure if he had thought about it in advance, but coming out of the chute with that one-liner, because we live in a democracy, I don't know how anybody would come back from that. So,
well, just those little metaphors, memes in your pocket, so to speak, are so helpful. And that's something that I love spending time with. I know, Nicole, you're very good at this, working with a team. What are your toughest objections? And then murder boarding them and really getting them prepped and having that muscle memory ready. So it is not the first time they've handled that. And then sometimes they just have that objection response that is so good. And if the person or group doesn't ask it, they will throw it out. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking that, and then they have the objection and they're ready for it. And so Yeah. Know what your objections are and be prepared for them beforehand.
Okay, the hat's coming out again. And I have to say I cheated because I haven't heard from Scott in a little while, so I just pulled a Scott question out. I saw his name. So Scott, this is one we get asked all the time. I know you get asked this. It's, what social media platforms should we be on and how often should we post?
I touched on this earlier, but I think it completely depends on your audience. I think that organizations can try to be on all of them because they've heard of all of them, and I don't think that's appropriate. I think for some organizations, you're going to definitely want to explore LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn reaches a different caliber of audience, and I think a lot of organizations are underutilizing their platform. With Facebook is huge, and I think that people, a lot of times with the Facebook platform, people are throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks, and so sometimes I don't think it's very effective. If you're able to dial in an audience that fits your particular niche, Facebook can obviously be effective. A lot of the social media platforms are just that. They're more social, and I don't think the type of content that you see really matches the kind of work that a lot of our clients are doing. And so, if you've got yourself a policy think tank website and you are using up real estate on your homepage for Instagram, is that the best use of that space? And are you reaching the right audience? And so I think really answering it is just like your response to how do you develop a marketing budget and all of that. You've got to look at it backwards. Who's your audience? What tools are they using? How do they want to receive your message? And then back into that, okay, we have the time and the resources and the expertise to really focus on these two well, and let's leave the other things for another time.
Do you recommend that organizations establish parking lot profiles on social media they're not using, like Instagram, if they're not using it?
It can be fine, except, and we've done the same thing, except I think that they become stale over time. And then all of a sudden your personnel changes or your branding changes, and because it is just parked over there, all of a sudden 2 years later you go to that Facebook community page that never really gets used, and you realize it's got a different mission that's outlined, it's got a different logo, different branding. It's just something that becomes out of sight, out of mind, and then it can diminish the continuity of your branding.
Okay, so if you do park, then make sure that's part of it gets updated every time everything gets updated somehow.
Sure. It's parked, but it's still part of your branding.
Right.
Sure.
Okay. I was just asking that because years ago when we had a new social media platform every 3 weeks, the problem would be if you didn't get your username, somebody else got your username and used it against you. So
I think it's more important with social media. It's more important to do a few of them really well than to try to do all of them. You look at the list of social media platforms, there are literally hundreds. And, it's easy to focus on that glass half empty kind of thing, like, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. Maybe we're missing a client or a potential audience member or somebody that could be an influencer. True, but when you focus on a platform just to reach 2 or 3 people, that still takes time and energy and resources away from, focusing on the platform that can reach a broader audience.
Okay.
Hey, Scott, as it relates to YouTube, how effectively have you seen YouTube used, and do you think it's an effective vehicle to get our messages across?
I do, and I'm glad you brought that up because I often don't think of YouTube as a social media platform. I almost think of YouTube as a cable channel. And I'm beginning to think, in fact, I saw a headline somewhere, it might have even been Drudge, beginning to view Facebook's Live as also a cable channel. Video is compelling, and all of the social media platforms are recognizing that. I think the video needs to be quality. It needs to be concise and well thought out. I don't think that when video is integrated into your plan, it needs to be done willy-nilly or with bad lighting or with, it doesn't need to look like a selfie done at a concert environment. It needs to look like something that is well thought out. So you're truly distilling complex ideas into something that's simple.
Scott, just a follow up on that. So let's say you've got somebody that has a story where they want to tell where their policy is affecting somebody, and they decide to go out and videotape them, and they come back and put something on YouTube. What do you think is the appropriate length of a video to do something like that? My experience has been that the ones I've seen seem too long.
Yes, I agree. And it's tough to distill things down to their essence, but really a 2-minute video, if you can capture somebody's imagination in 2 minutes and just focused on one idea, and if this is a topic that requires you to discuss 3 or 4 ideas, maybe you break it down into 3 or 4 videos. And now all of a sudden you have a video series that you can promote. And maybe what you find is your group over time on, say, LinkedIn, gravitates towards one type of policy idea. You feed that group those videos. You feed your Facebook community another set of videos. It allows you to parse your ideas in video format in the same way you might parse a white paper into chapters or into sections. I just think it's a good idea. The other thing I really like about YouTube is some of the ability to make video channels and then make those channels either private or public. We've had a lot of success where people will upload their videos into private channels and then feed those channels into their website. I never advocate having users or clients host their own videos. YouTube was built for videos. It's optimized for videos. It is the best, it's the second largest search engine in the world behind Google, and it is one of the best video servers out there available for free. And so let's take advantage of that and use that as the source for stuff that you put on your other platforms like a website.
Nicole, if I can just add one last thing, I love what Scott says there. One of the best pieces of advice came to me from one of my first bosses when I was in sales many years ago. And he said, Kevin, always leave them wanting more. Don't feel like you have to put everything into the video. If you just whet their appetite to the point where they want to click and find out more, really, you're really just, for the most part, really trying to whet their appetite to get them to click and engage with you again some other way. I think that's absolutely right. And I think that's why when some of the think tanks out there, if ahead of time they think about all the different ways their content could be used, the video really fits neatly into that, because you could take a 50-page white paper and very easily turn that into a series of maybe 10 2-minute videos that hit on each of the topics. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if somebody is interested in one of those, they can dig deeper. But the chances are they're just not. I mean, the chances are they have a lot of things going on with their kids and their work and their other interests. You need to give it to them in a little bites that they can then chew on over time and dig deeper over time.
Great. Well, I was going to take one more question out of the hat and then take questions via chat, but I already see a bunch of questions coming in on chat right now, so we'll just transition. And there are 3 questions put away for the next Q&A Spark session. So I am going to ask the audience, the question tool appears to not be working very well. So if you want to put your question in the chat window instead of the Q&A window, it'll make it get to me faster. So the first question I'm going to throw out there comes out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it says, we're thinking of doing a podcast. Do you think podcasts are still a good marketing tool? What tips do you have to make them successful? Example, length, frequency, and content. I'd like to take this first and then pass it to you, Scott, or Kevin, whichever one of you wants to talk about it, or you can pass. Interestingly enough, I have launched a personal podcast this year, in part to test if I could have better results than I had had in former years. And because I do work in the homesteading and regenerative agriculture world, what I found out throughout that process is a couple of important things. One, regular frequency is important. I think a minimum of weekly has to happen unless there is some reason that you can go monthly. A lot of people do them daily and they become disorganized on that schedule. So I would avoid committing to something that you cannot live up to. So weekly or bi-weekly is a really good frequency, but more importantly, the content needs to be well organized and informational and entertaining. So in order to get that to happen, to organize your podcast, what you want to do is have some recurring things that you hit every week, topics or segments, if you will, and try to make them entertaining. Think about your tone of voice when you're on the radio, because they're not seeing your face. They're not seeing visual aids. And look at ways to maybe bring guests in. Some of my most popular podcasts are when I interview somebody and there's that back and forth. It's a little friendlier. People are listening to these in their cars, when they're running, when they're doing something else. So think about your content, developing your content in the framework of, I want to be instructional, I want to be helpful, I want to be entertaining, and I want to be simple enough that they remember what happened on the podcast while they were working in their wood shop or going for a run. As far as, do I think it's a good marketing tool or not? Yes and no. It depends on who your target audience is and if they listen to podcasts. That's something you can find out by doing a little bit of research about your target audience and then seeing, okay, are these the kind of people who are going to download it, play it in their car on their commute? If so, then we'll give it a shot. I think you want to commit for a year if you're going to do a podcast. And you will find your first 5 episodes. For me, my first episode got tons of downloads because people know me, right? And then my second episode got like 10. And so you can't, when you're setting your measurement goals, you don't want to see, okay, I'll do it for 5 episodes. No, it's got to be for a year. You got to keep trucking through and then see how the audience builds over time. And like any new product, you're not just putting a podcast out. You're putting memes on Facebook. You're putting tweets out. You are communicating about that via email. You're doing all the things you would do for a policy report. So the other big question you need to answer is, do we have time internally to run this experiment? Now, what I have noticed lately is podcasts are a lot more popular in the last year and a half than I've seen them before. They seem to have come out of the nerd market and into a broader market, as I think probably because people's phones talk to their cars now. And so you can get your podcast automatically to your phone and it automatically links to your car, and not having to fuss with downloading a bunch of stuff and then plugging into your car. I think eliminating some of those barriers has made it better. As far as length, most of them are about half an hour, 15 minutes to half an hour. Really think about how long you can be entertaining. I listened to one that this guy can go on for an hour and 45 minutes and he's entertaining, but not everybody has that talent. So are there any other comments that you two have thought of while I was waxing on?
No, I would just reinforce the fact that you absolutely need to know your audience. Poll your audience, find out if they use podcasts, if they're interested in podcasts, because it is a lot of time and effort and energy and resources to put that stuff together to have 4 listeners. You've got to know your audience before embarking on that level of engagement.
Yep. And they say once you make it past your 10th episode, you probably can start calling yourself a podcaster. Most people make it to 8. So interestingly enough, I am at episode 8 right now. Okay. So this next question comes out of Madison, Wisconsin. I don't know who you are. I'm not seeing names today for some reason. So do you think social media is more important than your website? Scott, I sort of want to toss this one to you first.
Again, know your audience. Some people, I think for a lot of industries, organizations, you have a website that is A website is more like a business card. You have to have it. But does it do much? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes that is a central platform to all other things. I was, roaming around the internet the other day, and I landed on a page that I fully expected that they would have a robust website. When I landed on it, it was very pretty, but the headline was something to the effect of, isn't even the word homepage kind of retro at this point? And all they had were links to their other social media platforms. So they had that placeholder, but to me, it was really strange that placeholder, that parked social media space, was in fact their website. And where they were really focused on was Facebook and LinkedIn, and YouTube. So yeah, it just depends. It depends on who your audience is, and it depends on what kind of content you want to have. If you've got a news site where you're putting out or lots of text-heavy content in long form, I think a website is ideal. If your website is simply a launching point to your other social media platforms, then you can really simplify. And having a single page, kind of a landing page approach to a website with some key contact information, and it's really used as a jumping off point, I think that's fine too, as long as the presentation is professional, regardless of which way you go.
Great, thanks, Scott. Okay, this next one is our last question because we're running out of time. I want to wrap up at about 12:45. So this one is, how can you effectively market on a very small to no dollar budget? And do you have any good examples you can share? I can think of some, but I want to let Scott or Kevin jump in if they'd like to jump in here. Kevin has unmuted, so I'm going to let him take it.
I'll just take the first part. And as far as the vehicles are concerned, that's really not my game, but the content of it, you've got to have something that is viral as far as content. And that's where, if you just distill it down to the problem you're solving, who you're solving it for, tell a story. Have a great story of somebody that's being harmed without your policy, and make it outrageous, or have people be outraged about it, and let that story be viral. And then once everybody understands, Houston, we have a problem, there is a clamor for your policy. So that would be from a content perspective, that would be the thing I would be recommending. And then from the delivery side, that's where my expertise leads.
This is why Kevin, Scott, and I work together, because we all know different parts of Scott. What do you got?
Well, I just think that one other component to what Kevin said is timing. So for example, if you're advocating something related to Second Amendment rights, gun control, all of that, and a shooting happens, your timing is bad. There's no way around that. So thinking about your message or your policy prescriptions or your whatever argument you're making within the context of the current news environment, I think that's really critical, because launching a big effort in a media environment where it's just not going to get traction is a waste of resources.
Thanks. And I'll give you the marketing avenue perspective. The most important place to put your focus, I think, is developing killer content. So both of you have just said content related items. And that's something, sure, we can pay an expert, we can pay a PR firm to help us. And sometimes we need to do that. Many times I have a message, I'm running it by people who know nothing about what we do, because I want to see if it really makes sense. I like to use words that I know and have understood for many years, but that may not be words that people understand. When we say we do strategic planning, like, what does that really mean? It means something different to everybody. So content is where you can put your own focus, and you can get help from your friends and family for free. And if you have a budget, you can pay an outside facilitator, obviously, to help you. But when it comes to avenues, what do you really need to have in place to communicate with your people? Most people have email. Most people are on social media. You got to have a website. Can you build a website for free by yourself? Yes. Can you put a little bit of money in and get a better website, a better looking website? Definitely. So if I had a limited marketing budget, I'm going to make sure my logo, my brand has a package and a look and feel that's good. I might spend, $2,500 to $5,000 on that piece for over a whole year, which isn't very much. If I only have $500, then I'm going to spend that $500 on making sure design elements are good and do what I can to deploy a WordPress template that can be customized, integrate those graphics in, and then social is free. You can pay for social, but you can start out by putting things out on social for free. So if you're on a very tight budget, I think the place I don't like to go first is paying content developers or advertising dollars. And the most important thing is that you develop your content in a way that resonates with your target audience, even if that means walking down to the soup kitchen, if soup kitchen participants are your target audience, and finding out what responds with what they respond to, and then building that into something that looks good. Because really where people see you the most is your website. So if your website looks funky, that can be a turnoff for people. In fact, an organization we're working with right now, the Better Yes Network, launched a website. It doesn't have a lot of content on it, but they did that. They spent a bunch of time thinking about who they need to help and what they want to communicate, and put together, I think it's basically, like Scott said, this is a business card, but it has compelling graphics when you get there, and then very clear points about what they did. I thought that was wonderful. They're a startup organization, and that, you don't need to have a 27,000 page website at that point. You want to make sure people know who you are, how to engage with you, and how to be involved. So let's take one last question. Let's see, one more and then we're done. Any advice for making videos on a dime? Scott says no. Why? You're muted.
Because I think when you try to make them on a dime, you can make them on a dime with a lot of practice, but I wouldn't put your first experiment out there, as the face of your organization. As you conquer this learning curve, at some point you just need to practice with, images or videos of your kids and your pets and your vacation, just practicing making it look professional. Once you get the basics in place, then you can probably start using those skills for your organization, and that will definitely lower costs. But doing videos on a dime or using professionals that aren't so professional, I think you diminish the message. If it's presented poorly, people never really get past that presentation to get to the meat of your content. Your content might be great, the presentation is horrible, and they simply can't see past the presentation.
I saw a gentleman with a not-for-profit organization here where I live, and I did see him use it effectively, but it wasn't the whole presentation. He was giving a town hall presentation, and in the middle of the town hall presentation, he had gone out and met with the mayor of that city, and he used his telephone to just do a very quick Q&A with the mayor, and he popped that in the middle of his presentation. I thought it was very effective. Now, if the whole thing was that way, I would have screamed, oh my gosh, this is unprofessional. This just doesn't work. But the context of how he used it, I thought was incredibly effective. But you have to be careful. Don't let that be your main way of videotaping.
Right.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story about an organization many years ago when YouTube was young. They wanted to get into this video thing. They got a camera, put their policy person standing up with the wall, just like a plain wall behind him, and shot a 2-minute policy perspective, put it out on their website, and a board member called and said, why do you have a hostage video on your website? And this person knows who he is. And that perspective for him was funny because they'd worked so hard and then realized that the main character was not as engaging as they needed him to be. That person has gone on to be a really good video maker, by the way. But it's important, I think, when getting into new things, just like with podcasting. The reason I'm doing a personal podcast about homesteading and regenerative agriculture and food freedom on my own, separate from my brand, is when we launch our podcast, it has to be good. I'm making every mistake possible on my own podcast in my own network. So, if you want to do videos self-produced, it is a good idea to produce some of your own. There are also vendors who can create great videos for $500 to $1,500 for you. The key to success there is to have your content strategy done and know that you have a good story. So back to spending that time really getting your content developed well is important. But then when you're working with a vendor who says, I don't think this is very entertaining, then listen to them, because I know I get really interested in food freedom, and I can tell you all sorts of laws and other things that are getting in our way of being able to buy raw milk or shutting down the small family farm, but most people don't care about that, right? So they want to hear the stories. They want to hear about Joel Salatin. They want to hear about the Amish family in Michigan that was raided by the FDA and held at USDA and held at gunpoint for canning their own food, things like that. So anyway, that's our last question. Thank you everybody for coming to the Spark session. Let me know via email. My email is Nicole, Nicole, @sparkfreedom.org. If you liked this more informal format, instead of having pre-recorded answers to questions for the Ask the Expert session. And our next webinar will be the fourth Thursday in September, which I think is the 22nd. That date sticks out to me right now, but of course I'm not looking at a calendar. And there is a possibility though on that one that we'll move it. It is the 22nd, that we'll move it a week later, depending on our panelists' schedule. He may have a conflict with our time of day that day, so we're hoping to squeeze him in a week later. And I'm going to leave it a little secret about who that is until he's completely locked down. But there will be a topic-specific interview coming up next month. Thank you so much for coming, and go out there and be your best story, to quote Kevin Kerr. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.